From Atlanta, Georgia, this is Southwind, a program of the new sounds from the old Confederacy. I'm Boyd Lewis, producer and chief correspondent.
And I'm Faye McDonald-Smith, co-producer, welcoming you to this series on the South today.
They killed the black children.
They're killing our children, the Atlanta tragedy. 1979 wasn't a good year for Atlanta's carefully cultivated image as a city that had miraculously sidestepped the urban crisis. Crime statistics exploded that year. The number of homicides ran 60% above the previous year's total. Two murders especially monopolized the local and national news media for weeks and shook the $250 million-a-year convention industry to its roots. A visiting conventioneer was killed during a robbery attempt, and a secretary for a prestigious law firm was shot to death by a madman in the heart of downtown. In both cases, the victims were white, their assailants black.
On a hot Saturday afternoon in July 1979, the bodies of two black youngsters, Edward Smith and Alfred Evans, were found just 30 yards apart in a wooded section of a black middle-class neighborhood. They, too, had been murdered, but there were no outraged press conferences, no furious columnists demanding the National Guard, no shock wave. Two more youngsters were found slain that year, but there was no indication that this was the beginning of a 20-month wave of fear in what Atlanta's Mayor Maynard Jackson would call the most tragic situation in the modern history of our city, the unsolved killings of 20 black children and disappearance of another.
Without exception, all the children come from families of relatively low-income backgrounds. In the vast majority, there's a single parent, and the mother being in the family, in charge of the family.
ABC's World News Tonight, brought to you by Geritol.
The city awakened this morning to a new scare, word of yet another missing black child. The boy was found, but the report and the attention it got shows the mood of this city following the murders and disappearances of 20 black children.
They have brought in psychics, super cops. The people are here from the Justice Department from Washington. There's no clue. Whoever is doing this is very, very clever. They are intelligent. They're extremely smart.
Dear Father, we would pray that the horror of these crimes would be soon as an end.
The logical question that's often asked is, what is it that distinguishes these cases from other cases? Why are they not solved?
Atlanta Public Safety Commissioner Lee Brown.
In law enforcement, be it here or any other place, we need one of three elements to solve a homicide. We need a confession from the person responsible, or an eyewitness, or physical evidence that logically leads us to the person responsible. In these 18 homicides that we're carrying through the task force that are unsolved, none of those three elements are present. So as a result, we see a pattern where a child leaves home for some legitimate reason, the reason children leave home, to go to the theater, to go to the skating rink, to go swimming, or to go to the store, and then disappear. Then at some point later, the body is discovered. That some point has extended from 1 day to 1 year. And that's the difficulty we're having in solving the cases.
A special task force of 35 to 40 detectives has been joined by 24 FBI agents, computer and forensic specialists. But all the talent and all the tools, from psychics to crack investigators from Scotland Yard to Los Angeles, have not publicly moved any of these cases toward a solution. An official in the state crime lab, who insists that his name not be used, says that 9 and possibly 10 of the murders could have been committed by the same person or persons. The connection, according to the source, is in the way this group of children died, by strangulation or asphyxiation. 2 types of fibers were found in the clothing of several children, the investigator says, and there is another kind of evidence that, while not strong enough to convict someone, could rule him out as a suspect. Beyond this group of killings that investigators believe are connected, our source says, there are no clear patterns for the remaining 9 or 10 cases. One frightening possibility, Another psychopath may have been encouraged to kill by the massive publicity, the so-called copycat killer.
I believe that the person who's doing it, they might don't like little black children. And some probably have to want their children, they want to take it out on the blacks.
Are you afraid with all these killings of children in Atlanta?
Yes,
Why are you afraid?
because they keep on killing these children.
Why do you think they're doing it?
They might don't like black children.
Children in the Jonesboro South Housing Project. Like most of the projects in Atlanta, it is remote, poorly maintained, and overrun with children. Tony Mathis, age 13, lives in the project with his aunt. One day in late January, something strange happened to Tony and two of his friends as they walked home from school.
Me and my other two friends named Russell and Alonzo, we were on our way to school that morning. So we just walking to the school, up the street, and then there was a car came down the street. It slowed up, then it went down and turned back around and came back up the street. And then they when two men had called us. It wasn't two men. The white man had called us to the car, and we had ran.
Tony, what did the white man look like in the car?
He looked like he was in the late 30s. Had some eyeglasses on, and the hair was kind of long, going back about right here.
What did the black man look like?
But he was in his late 20s. Yeah.
What kind of face did he have?
And his face was kind of fat.
What did the white man say when he called you to the car?
He said, "Hey, y'all three boys, y'all come here." And we had ran, that's all.
Did you see anything in the car that made you worry about these two guys?
Just that red stain
What red stain?
that was in the back of the seat.
What kind of red stain was it?
I couldn't say because I wasn't in the car. And
What did it look like?
blood.
Tony's aunt, Mrs. Dorothy Mathis. How long has it been since that incident?
It's been 3 weeks to tomorrow.
And nobody from the task force has come out to talk to either you or Tony?
No. And not even the school detective, because the teacher said they talked to the school detective. But the school detective didn't get in touch with me because they said they were going to get in touch with the task force. And then they would get in touch with me, but they never did. And so I was waiting for the detective or whoever was supposed to come and talk, but they ain't came yet and they ain't even called.
To date, detectives from the task force still haven't talked to Tony about the incident. That's especially disturbing since a white man and a black man have been reported in several abduction attempts and have been seen at the memorial marches, weekend searches, and funerals.
And so it goes on. The people of Atlanta continue their vigil, a vigil of fear for black parents and their children particularly. For them, fear has become a way of life. Parents go into near panic if their child is 15 minutes late. A meeting of the Scott Elementary School PTA in northwest Atlanta on a rainy night in mid-February. February had been frightful. 3 bodies found, another disappearance, and 2 previously reported child deaths are officially added to the list. The PTA president, Mrs. Carolyn Turner. Are people scared?
Yes. Kids, parents, everybody. It's just a frightening thing nowadays. You don't know who you're talking to. You think it's a friend, but all at the same time, it's not a friend who you're talking with. You never know. You can't trust anybody nowadays. Father Patrick Bishop of St. Anthony's Church presided over the funeral of 11-year-old Patrick Baltazar, and he gives an example of the kind of fear that is so pervasive now in this city.
Several months ago, I was returning to St. Anthony's from a trip. There was a young boy sitting in a car waiting for his mother. And I had a message for her, and so I opened up the car door to hand him the message. And the boy burst into tears of fright. And only then did I begin to understand what some were feeling. And I could not comfort him. The only way I could help him was to close the door and to walk away from him so I would not scare him anymore. A priest, and I could not comfort him. And that boy's face is before me every night.
The victims range in age from 7 to 15. All except 2 were boys. Most of them came from poor families and from broken or foster homes. Some had been in trouble with the law. Some were very bright, very gifted. 11 of the 19 were so-called street kids, independent, hustling for small jobs. They bagged groceries, swept floors, peddled papers, sold candy, ran errands, anything to earn a few pennies for themselves and their families. The money they earned often made the difference between dinner or no dinner for the night. Because they were on the street, sometimes approaching strangers for odd jobs, they became easy prey. They became victims.
Very quiet children, clean-cut children, but they call themselves hustlers.
Street Kids has entered the vocabulary of the tragedy which has struck Atlanta. Many of the street kids are found in the Mechanicsville community, a collection of cinder block and leaning lumber in the shadow of the gleaming downtown. On Mondays, they come by the second-hand shop on Ira Street, run by a woman who prefers her name not be used.
What are you going to do when you get grown? I'm going to be a good hustler. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to make money.
Is hustler the magic word?
Yeah. One boy told me, you go to McDaniel McDaniel in George Avenue right there, and you just walk down the street going towards West End, and the men will pick you up. You make quick money.
Doing what?
He didn't say. I imagine. You can only ask so much, and you must shut up.
On the news last night, they were saying that many of the children were street kids, and I know for myself that most of them weren't street kids and not hustlers.
Mrs. Selena Cobb, mother of Christopher Richardson. She was one of the parents who met for a rally in downtown Atlanta in late February.
My child was just a normal little boy that loved to play with little toy men and wrestle, go to the creek and catch tadpoles and just, go up to the flea market and buy a little junk and stuff. That's all he did. And he was on his way to the park. And I think, that he had just as much right to go up to the park and go swimming as anybody else got. And I just didn't want him to be remembered like that. Because, see, a lot of people, most people don't know him. Just my family and friends know him, and they know that he wasn't. But I want everybody, in the city and nationwide to know that he wasn't a street kid, and most of the children were not street kids.
Mrs. Venus Taylor is the mother of Angel Lanier, who was 12 when she was found tied to a tree, strangled.
She was studying to be an astrologer, and that was mostly what she was into. She wasn't into, she didn't run no errands for nobody. Mm-hmm. That wasn't her thing. Actually, very sudden could just go to the store for me.
She was studying to be an astrologer. That's an unusual career profession. How did she get interested in that?
Well, I think maybe she probably was gifted with that, because she can just tell you about yourself, to give you your time you were born and your name and what day you're born, and she could tell you quite a bit about yourself. And it's not nothing, it's not no fixated stuff. She's pretty good at it. She was real good at it, and she was reading up quite a bit on it. She was very intelligent. She had a very high IQ. She was in a gifted class in Chicago for the past 2 years. She was an honor student, and she was very good. She knew algebra, trigonometry. She was very good at it.
Mrs. Helen Pugh is the mother of 19 children. 11 still live with her in a 3-room apartment in Atlanta. She says that she has dreams which come true. She dreamed that her 15-year-old son, Terry, would become one of the victims.
I had a dream before Terry got killed, and I had told Terry to stop walking the street by himself because the killer was out and he was very, mean. And Terry looked up at me. It was 2 days before Terry got killed, and I told him to catch him and strangle him to death. And I didn't know the dream was going to come true. You know what I said? Terry looked up and he said, "Mama, you're a trip. So then 2 days after, I found out Terry was dead. He was strangled to death.
There is no mourning for Mrs. Fannie Mae Smith, foster mother of Darren Glass. There is only a terrible waiting. Darren has been missing since last fall.
Like dreaming a bad dream and hoping that you'll wake up and find it's not so.
Do you think that the families who waited as you were waiting bore up under the strain, or was it very difficult for some of them?
Well, it proved difficult for some, and some was a little stronger than others, you know. But it just proved a nightmare, that's all. It's just a nightmare.
Venus Taylor is Secretary-Treasurer of the Committee to Stop Children's Murders, the organization of parents formed last year when police and the public seemed unconcerned about the disappearances and killings. She says the families are suffering more than grief.
A lot of these families are in very bad need. 3 of them do not have an apartment. 8 of them don't even have a phone. 3 of them haven't been able to work since their child was found murdered. 2 of the fathers have suffered heart attacks. 8 of the parents on 6 of them on medication. And 14 of the children, meaning sisters and brothers of the families that have suffered the tragedies, are under psychiatric treatment. And then